What is going on YouTube? This is Rybo here at the Fake Bench, and today I have a head-to-head knife review, the first in a while for me. But these two knives are in the collection at the moment, and while they're not the perfect head-to-head pairing, I do think that they'll be kind of interesting for reasons that I'll get into. So this is the Kabar Dozier, which if you are a fan of the channel, you are well aware of. I am a huge Kabar Dozier fan. I sing its praises all the time as, you know, one of the best $20 to $25 knives that you can buy, if not the best. So Aussate steel. I think the basic version is right around $20, $22. If you want to get into the coated blades and the different colors here, you're looking at 25, 30 bucks, but well under $30 usually gets you a Kabar Dozier. And this has kind of been my long-standing budget option. And then you have the Buck 110 Slim Select. So I've always wanted to try one of the newer kind of Buck 110s, and I finally picked one up at DLT Trading, and have been carrying it for a little while and very, very impressed. So I wanted to do a head-to-head. Now I do realize these are not knives that are necessarily the same size. I think the Buck 112 Slim Select is probably a better option for a head-to-head. But I did want to do this video anyway, and hopefully I'll pick up a 112 and maybe do some head-to-heads here, but there we go. All right, so let's show our categories. Pardon the sloppiness. So we have pocket clip, scales, overall size, that's height, width, weight, all that's weight, ergonomics, action detent, blade, steel, lock system, and the intangibles category. All right, so let's start with the pocket clip on both of these, which is probably the most interesting aspect to compare of these two knives. Not because the pocket clips are necessarily interesting in themselves, because they are both pretty ugly. So the Kabar Dozier, the pocket clip has long been my least favorite thing about the knife. It's just terrible. At best, I would say you could call this an afterthought of the knife. Man, it's pretty bad. Doesn't look very nice, kind of sharp. Spring tension's a little bit tight, coming down on the wrong plate. Anyway, I could go on and on. I do not like the Dozier pocket clip. And then you look at this thing, which is ugly as sin. And yeah, I mean, I thought that this was Texas at first, but it's the Anvil. I hate the way that this pocket clip looks, but I love the way that it functions. This is an excellent pocket clip. It is really, really phenomenal. So the first advantage here will go to the 110. The spring tension on this is the first thing I noticed. It is just perfect. Slides in and out of the pocket. It holds firm. You have a shorter clip here, similar to your bug out, and if the tension is right on a shorter clip, it is really phenomenal, and I don't have any issues with it. This one's really, really good. You have a little bit of a wider clip here as opposed to this, which I really, really like. Nice ramp. It's a deep carry fold over clip, which actually on a knife like this, I don't really want a deep carry because it's a pretty large knife. I would rather carry this a little bit higher in the pocket. But in terms of function, it's fantastic. I love a fold over clip. And in terms of function, this is just a phenomenal pocket clip. Now, if they could do something about the aesthetics, that would make this knife really, really fantastic. But pocket clip functions very well, so I'm very happy. Scales. So I don't remember what Buck calls their kind of plasticky whatever. This is Zytel, I believe, on the Dozier here, and a very similar material on the 110. I don't know that there's really an advantage to either one. You have maybe a little bit more grip on something like the Dozier here, but a little bit more basic in terms of the design, which is just fine. I mean, I've talked before, it kind of looks like a Delica or Spyderco bidirectional ripoff with the logo there and stuff. On the Buck, you have kind of a take on their classic design, where you kind of have your fancy material down here, but it's a very nice, grip right here. It's not super grippy, but the texture is very nice, very comfortable. I really can't really give an advantage to either one of these, so I'm going to call that a dead tie. Overall size, so this is clearly the larger knife. The Dozier is a little bit more kind of short and squat. The 110 has that classic profile. Really personal preference here. This is going to be a little bit better of a knife for, prying paint cans and doing some of the beefier work maybe. Whereas you have this swedge up here, which I really, really like and has come in handy for piercing and kind of slicing things. But there's going to be tasks that each one accomplish best, but we're talking overall size. I'm probably going to give the advantage to the Dozier here, and I like the size of both. The Buck 110 comes out at the end of the day as a little bit too large, just a hair too large, but it's also a decent bit heavier. The Kabar Dozier is just featherweight. It's very lightweight, whatever I'm trying to say. And if I had my scale and all that stuff, I could do a comparison like I used to, but this is just super, super lightweight. And the Buck is just a little bit heavier. And so I think at the end of the day, this one just feels like it's probably making better use of the space. So I'll give overall size to the Dozier. Ergonomics. So this is one where I think the Buck excels. The Dozier ergonomics I've talked about before, where I like that they don't tell you where your hand has to go, except that it has to go after this point right here. You can't really choke up on the knife. And my hands kind of naturally put my finger right on the edge of that little point there. It's not bad. It's something I've never really noticed, but if you can kind of see that all that grip is disappearing, not a ton of ample room, and it's not something I really noticed until I started carrying the Buck 110. But the Buck 110 is just huge, and I have a ton of space to put my hand. I'm not even coming out all the way here. And yes, I'm forced. I can't really choke up here, but it's very natural where I hold this knife. Ergonomics are really excellent. It's a thinner handle material right here, but much longer, and it works for my hands really well. The only issue I have is that this creates a hot spot. Shocker, the ugly part of this clip, where it doesn't really need to exist, creates a hot spot as it comes off, comes into my hand, or cuts into my hand. Excuse me, man, it's been a long day. And so that's really the only issue that I have with the ergonomics. But otherwise, I think the ergonomics on the 110 here are really excellent. Let's see, action detent. So both of these are backlocks, so it's a little bit tough to talk about the action because we're really not talking about anything phenomenal here, because you're going to have kind of stiff backlocks with each one. The problem here is that I've handled several Doziers and I've only handled one of these Slim Select 110s. The action on this one I much prefer to the Dozier. If I kind of do one of these and when I lock this knife up, it's got a very satisfying strong backlock, and it's got a very satisfying close. It just kind of springs close, and it's hard to describe that. The problem with the Doziers is that it's all over the place. I've had them that, like this one, has a very strong backlock, really strong, but it disengages very, very easily, and it closes pretty nicely. I've had them before where the backlock is not quite as strong. I've had them where it's a little bit hard. You have a kind of a catch here when you're trying to disengage. So they're just kind of all over the place, and these may be as well. I'm going to give the advantage to the 110 just because, I've kind of been all over the place, and it's probably just a cost thing. But the action on this one is really enjoyable, and I think it's easy to open and very satisfying to open that lock. So, that's very subjective, but there you go. All right, for the blade, you have two very different blades here. This is a hollow grind on the Dozier here with a very thin edge, which I think is one of the things that everyone loves about it, but you have kind of a thick belly on that blade, or a wide belly on that blade, which I personally really like. And then on the 110, you just have the classic 110 kind of clip point here with the nice swedge. Both of these are really excellent for doing kind of everyday carry tasks. They're both going to be excellent slicers. They're both going to be good at prying and pushing, push cuts and different things like that. For a long time, this has been a favorite blade shape of mine, and the Dozier has just been a favorite. But I have been very surprised at how much I've enjoyed this blade on the 110. It's kind of that classic look, that traditional look, and so you may think like, oh, we've come a long way, or it's just, I don't know. For me, I just kind of stayed away from this just because it was an older style, and that sounds ridiculous, but I've been really impressed with this blade. At the end of the day, I'm going to give it a dead tie because I just don't have enough time with it to really make a judgment call. I think both of the blade shapes in their own ways are really, really good. The steel. So you have Aus-8 here and 440C, I think, here. This is one of those topics that I'm gonna try to make. I'm gonna try to make a ranking just based on what I've read and a little bit of my experience. But I have a lot more experience with Kabar's Aus-8 over owning several Doziers over the years than I do with the 110, but I've read a lot about this. So the Aus-8, if you watch the channel, you know that I'm a bigger fan of Aus-8 than many people are. Just I'm a practical man, and I think that it actually does a lot more than people give it credit for. That said, with K-bars on non-coated blades, I've had a decent bit of rust issues. Besides that, no real issues. I mean, I have an orange Dozier that is non-coated, and I just beat the thing up, and it's held up just fine. I haven't really had chipping or anything like that. It sharpens back up. Obviously, doesn't hold an edge super long for a super long time, but I've actually been impressed with the steel. The only issues I've had are the rust issues. Now with Buck's 440, I've had very good experience so far. I don't think had to sharpen this after the initial touch-up, but no rust issues. They kind of have this semi-stone-washed kind of finish on the blade. Just based on what I've read, I think that we can probably objectively say that the Buck steel is a higher quality. And I'm not a steel guy, but that's what I'm going to go with there. Based on what I've read, based on kind of what I've seen between the two so far, that's the judgment call I'm going to make. Lock system, so they're both back locks. You have two different kind of implementations here. You have this right here where the lock bar is fairly accessible, about halfway down. Then you have this traditional back lock all the way back here. This one's an easy one to me, at least just from a practical user standpoint, but I'll give the advantage to the Dozier here. While the back lock here I think is more satisfying and the quality of the lock feels a little bit higher on the 110, at the end of the day, it's the same issue I had when I was a kid with these knives, which is this is just a harder to operate lock than a mid back lock like this. I find that it's much harder to get a grip on the knife to close it one-handed. I kind of end up having to use a knuckle to push down because the tension is here. The tension over here is so much greater. Fairly hard to push down. Plus you have this kind of notch here where it doesn't go all the way across. Just overall not very easy to open and close, or to close when the lock is engaged. And for me, that's a good part of judging the lock system. Whereas on the Dozier, and again, quality control issues, but very, very easy to disengage and close. And I just have a much easier time gripping the knife and pushing that down. So I think it's an easier lock system. The spring isn't quite as strong as on the 110. And I just have a much easier time with it. So I'm going to give the advantage to the Dozier. So that leaves us with the intangibles category. And this is where I can't believe I'm going to do this, but at the moment, I'm going to give the advantage to the 110. I love the Dozier, and I've done many videos on the Dozier before. But when I got the 110 and I really started using it, and remember, I use my knives. Every knife, including the Chris Reeves, my Sabenzas, the Spidey Chef, all the knives that I have, they're all users. So I've used this knife for a lot of things. I've been amazed at how practical this knife is, and the quality for 27 bucks is really there. It's easy to carry, it's lightweight. The blade shape is just a classic shape. It's a good steel, and it's kind of a tested steel in terms of Buck's implementation of it. Feels very good in the hands besides that pocket clip issue, but overall, just been very, very impressed. I mean, I think the one drawback for me is just the, disengaging the back lock. But other than that, this is a really phenomenal knife, and I've been very impressed with it. So for right now, this is 2020. I'm going to say that the Buck 110 Slim Select has dethroned the Dozier as the Ribos Workbench budget knife of choice. And we'll see if that holds up. Maybe next time I'll try to grab a 112. But for right now, this is the king. Hope you've enjoyed this head-to-head review, and I'll see you next time.